scene started in a hall of a castle, where a couple was having tea. Aster asked his wife for a divorce. That wasn't funny and certainly not suitable on their wedding anniversary, and he had found someone he really loved. And unlike Letty, that lady was an innocent who wasn't calculating. Let slammed on the table by asking that how he could say such. Aster asked that was she going to bring up her family again. She agreed and said that did he even know how much her father had invested in the business of his father to help him. Aster said that he had settled all his debts. Leto said that did he mean kindness, not the debts, and what did he settle? Aster replied, "Don't act like she didn't know," and he gave back all things like the entire investment, and that was a bit overdue. Letty thinks that Aster had always been like that and downplaying his own mistakes as if they weren't a big deal. She told him that he missed the deadline, and because of that, her family hit rock bottom, and her father even took his own life, so how he was daring to do such. She reminded that in high society, having no money wasn't a problem, but once they lost their honor, that was it. Letty's father was the head of the Violet family and went bankrupt because he couldn't recuperate his investment in time. After assuming all the responsibility, he committed suicide, and there was only one reason he had given Aster the money, because Aster was the husband of his beloved daughter. Then Letty asked Aster if he had any plans to marry that other woman and did he think Letty didn't know. And if that wasn't for that woman, there was no reason for him to divorce Letty first. Aster replied that it was enough and he had no time for all that, so let's discuss the alimony. She shouted to stop talking about the money and what good that was. That wouldn't bring back her dead father. She thought she was going to expose him and how vile he was and what a dirty coward he was. Aster slapped her and said that he resented that again and again and that it was all about his past. He was sure that even her father would be speechless if he saw her like that, and it was exactly why he was fed up with her. The reason she didn't get treated as the lady of that house was that she behaved so emotionally. He was telling her that, but being married to her was so suffocating, and it felt like being hounded every day by creditors. He felt driven whenever he saw her face, and he would become the biggest bastard in that world. He then took out his marriage ring and placed it on the table, asking her to let him go. He wanted to be happy as well and have a normal family like others, with a wife whom he loved. He wanted to say something more but stopped. She asked what it was, and he replied that he wanted a child as well who looked like him, but she wasn't able to give him that. With that said, he stepped outside. Letty sat in the park and thought that he didn't have any right to mention those words, and she was unable to have children because he was the one who pushed her off the stairs in anger when they were young. She remembered that when she fell, afterward she was resting in her room. Aster was also there, apologizing to her. She replied that it was fine and he didn't do it intentionally. He just promised her that he would marry her. She was so excited to hear that. Aster agreed and asked her to let him atone for his mistake for the rest of his life next to her. She thought that it was the promise they made, and he said that he would stay with her forever. But once she saw him telling Rianka that she was the only one for him, Letty wondered how he could do that. Just then, Winchester came to Letty and said that she presumed Letty had already heard from Aster. Letty agreed and said that the reason she couldn't have children was because of the incident with Aster. Winchester said that she already knew that, and Letty should have looked after herself better as a woman, criticizing the lifestyle that led to Aster seeking a divorce. Winchester advised Letty to be a bit more affable in another family. She also suggested that there was surely a family that would take her in. Winchester told William to say something to Letty because it was her last day there. He placed his hand on her and said that he knew she tried her best there and how much that would be if giving one's best was enough, but she should cut her coat according to her cloth. They could only achieve so much with effort. Winchester then came in between them by pushing Letty and said that she had already packed Elgie's things and put them at the entrance. As her last gesture, she called a carriage for Letty, so she should just take that wherever she wanted. By stating that she hoped to never meet again, they both left from there. Letty got to the entrance and realized it was the carriage to transport goods. She hadn't even signed the divorce papers. It was as if they had been waiting for that moment. But that wasn't everything. She had clearly brought more things when she first arrived there. Just then, Olivie splashed a bucket full of water on Letty and, acknowledging her mistake, Olivie asked if Letty was fine. She continued that she didn't have any idea that someone was there and Letty must be so cold. Olivia personally packed Letty's things together so she didn't have to worry and could leave from there. Letty was trembling there, and when she saw the dress Olivia was wearing, she realized it was her grandmother's heirloom. Olivia asked what Letty was saying and mentioned that Letty might have lost her mind because she was in shock. Olivia mentioned she loved to see Letty leave but was afraid she was busy because she needed to clear the main room for their new guest. Letty thought not to mention that they were giving that main room to another lady. She just told them to wait and wondered if that was all over like that. Some servants told her to calm down. Letty thought about how they could do such a thing and that it couldn't be happening. In the end, she wondered if ever for a moment she was part of their family. As Letty arrived at the Violet household, her stepmom mentioned that Letty had been divorced by Aster on the day of their wedding anniversary. Letty apologized for that, but her stepmom remarked that Letty had made the family go broke. The least Letty could do was to be happy. She mentioned that not only did they go bankrupt because they had to invest in that competent husband of Letty's, but Graham also took his own life. Her stepmom expressed frustration that people were pointing fingers at her as Letty's stepmom, especially since Letty came there after getting divorced. Her stepmom blamed Letty for Graham's suicide and the death of Letty's little sister due to her illness, saying it would have been better if Letty had gone together with her sister. She then told Letty to get out of there. As Letty excused herself, her stepmom stood up, stating that it was a shame on Letty to come there and ordered her to leave and never think of coming back again. Letty left her home with her luggage, realizing that she hadn't imagined such things would happen and had lived like a fool, with no place to go and no one waiting for her. She walked close to the river, wondering if jumping into it would be fine. As Letty turned, she saw Aster with Rianka. Someone nearby commented that Letty was full of self-pity. Aster remarked that he couldn't stand to watch that and offered his hand to Rianka, suggesting that she shouldn't stay there. Rianka thanked him and said she would have a quick chat and come back. Aster then gave her a hug and told her to do whatever she wanted. Rianka then approached Letty and asked if she was fine, mentioning that the wind blowing was so cold, so she gave her blanket to Letty. She then touched Letty's hand and remarked that it was cold as ice, wondering what they were going to do. Rianka then asked if Letty didn't mind. Could they take a walk on the riverbank and talk for some time, because she had something to discuss with Letty. Letty declined and freed her hand. Rianka grabbed her hand again and asked if Letty wasn't curious about what happened before Letty's father died. Letty looked at Rianka and asked what she was saying. Rianka mentioned that Letty's late father was very special to her and commented on Letty's expression. Letty wondered why Rianka was talking about her father. Rianka said that it was no wonder Letty got beaten by Atticus and that she had quite a temper. She told Letty to get rid of that scowl and just follow her because if he came, she would lose her chance to hear what Rianka had to say. But Letty didn't have to come so close, as Rianka didn't want the stable stench to get all over her. Letty was clenched and thought that she knew what Rianka was like when she seduced a married man, but Rianka was really cunning and made Letty's blood freeze. As they came to a distance, Rianka said that it should be fine and that it was cold, so she didn't want to do it. Before she could finish her words, Letty slapped her strongly because Rianka insulted Letty's father. Letty made her pay the price for that insult and said they could now continue their talk. Rianka laughed and said that it was so interesting, and then she asked Letty if Letty knew what a person always does before killing themselves. They modified their will. People always want to leave their last dying wishes before they go. Letty said that her father hadn't changed his will. Rianka replied that Letty's father had done that, and he had gone to change his will so he could leave the family fortune to Letty. Then Rianka asked if he hadn't been able to change his will before he passed, who would benefit the most from that. Letty thought that it would be Genia, who was a noble in the countryside and was a distant relative of the Violet family. When her husband died of illness, she and her young son had nowhere to go since they were poor, and that's when her divorced father took pity on her and took her in as a second wife. If he had changed his will as Rianka suggested, she wouldn't have been able to remain in the Violet family and act so arrogantly. Rianka then said, "Doesn't that make Letty curious if her father really committed suicide, and did her ex-husband really die of an illness? If she didn't believe her, she should check for herself. Genia used to live in a small rural town, so there should be someone who knows." Letty asked why she was telling all of this to her. Rianka replied that initially, she disliked Genia, and it annoyed her that Genia had been trying to seduce Aster. Letty asked Rianka what she was saying. Rianka replied that it was the truth, and that he didn't even bat an eye, but she pretended to be drunk and even took her clothes off. The second reason was that Rianka felt sorry for Letty. By stating that, she metaphorically stabbed the knife into Letty's chest and pushed her into the river, stating what a pity it would be if Letty died not knowing any of that. She then said goodbye to Letty and mentioned that it was time to go and meet her late father. Letty fell into the river and felt intense pain, hurt by her foolishness. She had tried to care for others and in the process sacrificed what was important: her father, her family, and even herself. As she was underwater, a man came, kissed her, and told her not to cry, instructing her to keep her mouth shut if she didn't want to sound like a crow forever. Afterward, as she opened her eyes, she found herself lying on a bed. She wondered where she was, and the injury on her chest had already healed. The man returned and remarked that she had finally woken up, finding her annoying, trembling, and asking him to hold her every night. She recalled that he had been called Prince Sion, known as the miracle of the Westeros Empire. Sion confirmed that she was correct. Then she asked why he had saved her. Shin replied that he would be asking the questions first, pointing out that she was the only legitimate child of Count Violet and the daughter-in-law of Marquis Winchester. He questioned how she had been stabbed and swept away in the river. He got very close to her and said that he had barely managed to stop the bleeding, warning her not to touch it as it might get infected again. He then proceeded to lick and suck the blood from her wound. Just then, Rang entered and told Sion that he was bothering her again and that she had just woken up. Sion asked him if he wanted Sion to show him what real bothering was. Rang apologized to Letty for the disturbance and mentioned that she must have been startled waking up in a strange place. He then revealed that she was in a cabin on the Westeros passenger ship. Westeros was located to the west of the Northland and was known as a holy empire because it was said that the gods had remained there until the end. Perhaps due to this reason, there were occasionally special individuals born among the imperial family. One of them was a man known as Sion, who had divine powers. Letty wondered why he had saved her. Rang told her that she didn't have to worry and they were not headed to the western continent. She replied that she was interested to hear what happened. Rang explained that during their visit to the Northland, Soon and he were looking around when they were swept away into the riverbank, and she was on the brink of death for almost a week. She asked if that was how Sion normally healed people. Rang said that through engaging in physical contact and spending time together, Sion could quickly heal small injuries, but she was in a severe state, so he didn't have any other choice. She then asked if Rang had informed her family that she wasn't dead and was still alive. Rang confirmed and mentioned that they had already held a funeral. She was shocked to hear that. Rang continued, saying that they had told everyone that the chronic depression she had been suffering from since her father's death had resurfaced, and she had jumped into the river in front of her stepmom. She wondered aloud if she had jumped into the river while her stepmom was watching her. Rang stated that Sion had discovered a dagger stuck in her body. Sion asked her if her stepmother had stabbed her. Rang agreed and mentioned that her stepmom was the last witness. Sion asked if he had questioned Rang about that. Letty replied that it wasn't Genia, and Rianka was the one who had stabbed her in the chest. Rang asked if Rianka had rare pink eyes and bluish hair. Letty asked if Rang knew Rianka. He denied it and said that his messenger had seen her, learning that she had been crying in deep sadness at Letty's funeral. Then Rang asked if Letty was willing to go back to her husband. She denied it and mentioned that chances were high he was involved in that situation. She thought that maybe she should have just died at the riverbank, but she wondered why she should die when those people were the ones who deserved it. She vowed to make them pay for what they did, no matter what it takes. Shane commented that she had a different look in her eyes, and after hearing her explanation, he wanted to make a proposal. She questioned him about that. He replied that he would tell her how she could exact her perfect revenge, and it would be so brutal that those who wanted to destroy her would wish for their own death. When? He continued, telling her to do as he instructed, and she would not only get her revenge but also regain all the things she lost, including her wealth, honor, and even her life. She replied that there must be a price she needed to pay. Shen replied that there was the eternal death of Letty Violent Winchester, and that was what she wanted. She asked if there was something he wished to achieve through her. He replied that she was sharp. then sat down, stating that the culprit who had murdered someone beloved to him lived in the Northland. He needed someone who could blend into high society there and gather information from people so he could find the murderer. She would be the one to do that, and in return, he would give her a new identity and a new life. He then wiped the tears from her cheeks and said that he would change her face using his powers so that those people wouldn't be able to recognize her. She asked if changing her face was really possible. He agreed, stating that he was the almighty Sion. She questioned why he was doing such things to her when they were strangers. He replied that they weren't entirely strangers since they had bumped into each other at her wedding. She countered that they had only talked a bit then, and she didn't think they were close enough to discuss such a serious proposal. He grabbed her hand and stated that he believed he had given her important advice that he would hardly refer to as mere. He urged her to immediately run away from Aster. The scene shifted to the past on the day of Letty and Aster's wedding, with all the guests entering the banquet. Someone remarked that they knew it was winter in Winchester, but it hardly felt like a wedding. Another person asked what they could do since Aster couldn't stand hot weather. A lady asked a man if he had seen Sol from Westeros attending. The man replied that he had heard Sol came with the Northland's second prince, and that it seemed like he wanted to see the first Sol born into the imperial family in the last 300 years. Sol had the ability to repel evil and heal people. Someone mentioned that they had never imagined they would be able to see him. Letty also glanced at Sion. Aster's mother approached Aster and Letty, stating that they should thank her because they had such an honored guest with them. She mentioned that she used to be childhood friends with Calix's mother, Anna. Then she instructed a girl to ask the chef if he could prepare Western continent cuisine. The girl agreed and said to just do what they used to do and asked if he could prepare it that late. Winchester remarked that it was true and expressed disappointment at Letty's father for the lackluster nature of his only daughter's wedding. Aster told his mother to stop, and she agreed, mentioning that they say a new woman in the family will turn his son against him. Olivie suggested having Sol from Westeros give the congratulatory speech to silence the guests. Winchester thought it was a great idea. Jur said she would go and ask Sol about it. As Olivie went out of her way for Letty, Winchester commented to Aster to observe and learn a thing or two. The girl returned looking upset, and her mother asked if Sion had agreed to do it. The girl denied it, explaining that Sion said he would consider it if the bride and groom came and asked. Winchester then asked Aster to go and ask. Aster replied that he wasn't sure why he should. Letty thought that if Olivie failed, maybe she could try. Then she suggested to Aster that they should go and ask Sol for a speech, as it would be a great way to raise the family's reputation. Aster agreed with her, and as they approached Sol, he asked who they had there, calling them the highlight of the day's wedding. Aster and Letty bowed before him, stating they were at his service. Sion interrupted, asking if they had come again to ask about the speech. Sol stopped Sion from speaking further and asked if he was wrong. Aster said that being able to hear Sol's speech would rid his family of all distress. Sion remarked that he was serious and didn't even remember their names. He implied that simply hearing their speech wouldn't bless Aster's family because he had no blessings to offer. Aster seemed angered by this revelation. Aster said that he had seen that it was a mistake to come. Then he excused himself and got away from there. Leto tried to stop him, but he freed his hand and asked what he had told her. Then he got away from there. Letty thought that she should never have thought she could do that when Olivie couldn't. Sion asked Sol if Aster had just left his wife because he was upset. Letty just apologized to them and said it was an honor itself that they had come there and just forgave them for upsetting them with such personal wants. Sol told her that it was her wedding, so there was no need to bow. She still bowed and said that she hoped they would enjoy the rest of the day. Sion told her to wait and that there was a statement he wanted to make to her, which was to run. She wondered about that. Shane said that he literally meant to run from that moron and that she would never be happy being with a loser like Aster. She got up and asked to be excused, then she left from there. Sion commented that she was a fool. And Sion said to Letty that she hadn't listened to his advice at that time, and he guessed that meant she loved the moron that much. He took the ring off her finger and, throwing it, said that it was what she got in return, and she was basically fighting a losing battle. She asked if that could really help her seek revenge. As he agreed, Letty said that she would accept his proposal. He stood up, stating that as the deal was made, she should kiss his feet. She excused herself for that. Rang said that there, in the Hoji Empire of Westeros, they had the custom of kissing the feet of the imperial family never when pledging undying loyalty. It signified their obedience to the other person for the rest of their life. She thought that she had heard that the progenitor of Westeros was a demigod, and he was said to have used his divine powers to have his subordinates make a special pledge. And that's the custom that ended up becoming the imperial family's tradition. Sen told her that the moment she became his, she would never be able to become Leti Violet again. She replied that it was good news. Getting up, she thought about the foolish woman who endured everything until she was killed by the Sky Mistress who scorned her, the foolish girl who squandered all her family's money on her cheating husband, and the noble daughter who drove her kind father to death. She saw it as a golden opportunity to erase all that. She then kissed his feet and reminded him that he had promised to help her seek revenge, so he shouldn't break that promise. He grabbed her head and said that from there on, she would serve him as her master until she died and submit to his commands. He did something to her and asked if she was feeling nervous. She replied that she was a bit, but she wasn't worried he would ruin her face. He remarked that she was worried about what was to come. She assured him that she would be able to do whatever he commanded. He told her to forget their trivial thoughts and not be like the moron who became greedy when he was given what was too good for him. She was scared, and he didn't support her by saying it was fine for her to fail or telling her that he believed in her. He emphasized that it didn't mean she should underestimate herself. Then, he extended his hand, indicating that Leto was now fine forever, and from that day forward, she would be the Countess of the Cant Dukedom. He showed her face in the mirror and said that even her parents wouldn't be able to recognize her. She thought of the dark brown hair like asters, and her features were sharper, even her eyes were more piercing. She couldn't believe that she looked like that all because Sion had touched her face. Sion commented that the result was pretty good. Rang said that Letty was like a classical beauty in a famous film. Then Sion told her to go and take care of the rest. Rang asked Letty to follow him. Letty called Sion and thanked him for that. He replied that there was no need to thank him and what he wanted was for her to be useful. He wanted to see her struggle, not to be abandoned by him. Rang took her to the dressing room and, while washing her hand, he said that he didn't know she had met Sion before. She replied that they weren't that close. Rang proceeded to comb her hair and remarked that she was in the same boat, so she couldn't say that she was totally a stranger. Then he gave her the finished look and let him tell her what she must do from there. She will be living as Anar, the Countess of Cant Dukedom and the rising star of the Cant Dukedom's high society. As a result, she might receive training for a year to learn all the things required in the Cant Dukedom. She asked if she would be going to the Cant Dukedom. He agreed and said that she must learn their culture, accent, and the demeanor of the women firsthand. The Cant Dukedom was a country where, as long as they were competent, even a woman could hold a dukedom or county in her own right. On the contrary, in Northland, women couldn't inherit titles due to deeply rooted customs. As a result, she could not inherit a title despite being the only legitimate child of the family. It was great that she was from the Cant Dukedom, which she had long envied, but she had never been to the Cant Dukedom. And she also had never left Northland, so did Rang think that would be fine? Rang replied that Cant used the common languages, which she was fluent in. She responded that Cant had their own unique accent. He reassured her not to worry and said that a year wasn't a lot of time, but they would provide her all the support so no one would be suspicious. She thought of her new look, new title, and even their support, and she knew she had to live up to Sion's expectations. Just then, her wound started bleeding again. She mentioned that maybe she had stayed in the warm bathroom too long, which sped up her blood circulation. Rang suggested that she should go to Sion if that's the case. She felt something and said that she was fine. Rang advised her to just go, adding that Sion was great at making people feel uneasy, but if she got to know him, she would realize he could be quite the opposite. She asked him to explain that. He remarked that she didn't need to intentionally please Sion or like him, as the only thing important to Sion was utility, and he doesn't treat people based on personal feelings, so she didn't need to tread on eggshells. Finally, she arrived in front of Sion's room and knocked on the door. Sion opened the door and asked what happened. She replied that her wounds had started bleeding again, and she didn't mean to bother him, but Rang told her to come and see Sion. He asked her to come in, and then she lay down. He checked her body, and she questioned Sion about why he thought the wounds were taking so long to heal. He replied that there was something bad in the dagger, and what was certain was it wasn't because of his skills. She agreed and said that she thought she was a lot better thanks to him. He replied that it was the owner's responsibility to take care of their horse. Then he moved his hand through her hair. She thought that he was patting her hair as if she were a dog, and wondered when the last time someone did that was. He then asked her if she was still sad about the things she left behind. She replied that she didn't leave them behind because she wanted to, but they were stolen from her and trampled on. Shan asked her how she got herself mixed up in all that, as she didn't seem like the type to have enemies. She replied that it was because she seemed like a pushover, someone they felt would be easy to manipulate. He tapped on her hand and asked why Northland women got especially bound to their husbands, mentioning the ancient custom of burying the wife alive with a dead husband. She explained that it wasn't as extreme, but it was still a traditional continent. He asked if that was why her husband was able to proudly go around with his mistress. Letty got serious and stated that a man's extramarital affair was nothing to be proud of, but it was also nothing to be ashamed of either. She mentioned that it was the norm to look the other way if it didn't disturb the wife's status or line of succession. Sion asked about the other woman and what happened when a married woman had an affair. As they were talking, Letty said that in the Northland, when a married woman had an affair, she was immediately sent back to her parents. Instead of getting a share of the wealth, she must pay alimony to her husband and in-laws, and if she had choked, they might have been deprived of their right to succession. Sion said that the punishment was quite severe, particularly for women. She asked if she could inquire why he had wanted to know. He replied that he wanted to have had that affair. He then got above her. She wondered what she had heard. He told her that she had been kicked out even before having an affair and had been declared dead, so she didn't need to pay alimony. She also had no children who would lose their right to succession, and it would have been ridiculous to have had an affair with anyone worse than her ex-husband. That would have been retrogression, not advancement. He tried to reassure her by saying that if that made sense, he didn't think that he was a bad candidate, so what did she think? She became so emotional and asked if that was what he meant by her utility. She thought she was used to being treated like a room, and in the Winchester household, she was treated as a milk cow and an object to be used. She had been a plain puppet-like wife for Aster, but she took a new stance and told herself that she wouldn't live like that anymore. The chance that she barely grasped was basically that. She then apologized to him and said that she would have to go back to her room. He was rushing away and glanced back to see her crying as well. Rang approached Sion and said that he mustn't tease her further, as she was a poor soul. Sion replied that she was at fault for leaving before he finished. Rang asked who would want to pretend to be lovers in that manner and that she would truly misunderstand that. Sion told Rang to shut up and help him with his wardrobe. Rang asked if Sion remembered that he was the son of Westeros finance minister. Sion asked if Rang remembered who Sion was and warned Rang to shut his mouth. Rang agreed and acknowledged that Sion was the prince, but added that Rang expected nothing less from Sion. Rang then proceeded to make Sion's outfit fine and suggested that if Sion was worried about Letty's reaction, he should clarify what he said and clear up the misunderstanding, as that would make Sion's plan go smoothly. Meanwhile, Letty, while sleeping, had a dream in which she was being chased by someone. The person had a dagger and told Letty not to run but to be at peace, and let herself fall. The lady mentioned that it was the best she could offer and questioned why such a nuisance had come into their family and suggested that if anyone were to die, it should be Letty instead. Letty was desperately asking for help from anyone. Many hands reached out to grab her, but only Aster came and took her hand. She pleaded for his help, but Aster vanished, and then the lady in her dream stabbed Letty with the dagger, killing her. Letty woke up from the nightmare feeling terrified. She walked around and, feeling unable to cope, she resorted to drinking to numb herself. Just then, Sion arrived and asked what she was doing there. She was surprised and quickly put the bottle back in its place. Shan remarked that her wound was severe, yet she was drinking. She explained that she couldn't sleep because the pain was too intense. Sion suggested that if that was the case, she should come to him. He then told her to consider why they didn't have any painkillers available. He stepped closer to her and, upon opening her upper coat, noticed that the injury was bleeding heavily, which he attributed to the alcohol. He then tended to the bleeding. Letty thanked him and expressed her understanding that he might be upset because of her actions. He pondered this for a moment, then sat down, commenting that it was frustrating. He asked her to sit as well because they had unfinished matters to discuss. Thank you for watching our video. If you like our romance manhwa recaps, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can also watch a similar romance manhwa story by clicking on this video right here.